Welcome home. We are WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. Reminding you once again, if you watch us out on YouTube, or you hear us on the radio, or you see us out on the podcast land, or just listen somewhere in the cosmos, make sure you're setting a place on the radio dial at AM 1570. We are still on around the Beltway, and I gave us a spin last week, and some of the competitors. We're pretty good at this still. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I don't know. I have a handful of Pac-Mans left. I got to get the Lucky Sevens this week from Roz. We're going to be at Coco's Pub on Wednesday from 2 until 5. I think I erroneously said 1 till 4, but Coco's is kind of small and tight. She gets a big lunch crowd. We're going to be there 2 till 5. We try to stay out of the way, even though we'll be in the way. Max Weiss will be there. I have some old friends threatening to show up who are remaining anonymous right now. We'll talk to them a little later on. But Rasig is going to be my co-host with a K. Damian Adarty is going to be over talking politics, life in the big city, and lifting Baltimore. That's what we're trying to do around here. I got my Baltimore shirt on, courtesy of our friends at Curio Wellness and Far and Daughter, who are also involved in our 25th anniversary documentary. Lots of folks still feeding back on that. And I watched it on a plane over the weekend. Somebody wrote to me this weekend. So I said, thank you very much. Appreciate all the feedback. I'm still sharing pieces of that out. Luke Jones is a big part of that, especially at the end. He comes in around 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there. And all we've done since then is fix the baseball franchise, feed the football team. And he has a about to burst sister with another child. So we have labor care, Deacon Jones, Braves in town, Phillies in town, Fleet Week. And oh, by the way, they're going to gather and have, I put air quotes on this for those of you not watching, real practice this week out in Owings Mills. Are you toweling off? You're not shaved. Are you on a shaving strike till your sister gives birth to your second niece?
No, I just hate shaving, but I need to do it every few days because I get that 5 o'clock shadow grows in just about instantaneously. But yeah, busy week, really good weekend for the Orioles. And part of that, a nod to the LA Dodgers for taking 2 out of 3 from the Yankees after the Yankees hadn't been losing at all here over the
The
last three,
Yankees and
4 weeks.
Dodgers should never play anywhere but in the World Series. That's a friggin' rule. That's the way it should be.
It is funny when you get a matchup like that. And obviously, so much of the history. I mean, if you're really a baseball fan and a historian, I mean, it's the Yankees and the Brooklyn Dodgers, when you go back to the days of Jackie Robinson and so forth. But
They're like Dodgers fans marching on Yankee Stadium. It was kind of cool.
yeah, it was. It was. And like I said, for Orioles fans, it was cool to see the Dodgers win a couple games there and the Orioles able to gain some ground this weekend. And, this weird wraparound 4-game set with a Monday night getaway game. I mean, you want to talk about complaining about the schedule. And we've talked about
This
this a
was
lot.
hokey. I looked at it and I thought they had been
Yeah.
playing the Braves Monday night, right? And it almost makes Monday feel like a holiday, and it's like June 10th.
Well, but the thing is with the Monday getaway game, why aren't they playing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? I mean, you typically try to do getaway days, a day game for the road team to get home, especially when they don't have an off day the following day.
By the way, what difference does it make in Tampa? Nobody's coming anyway.
Right, exactly. But we've talked about this long stretch for the Orioles where they have this one off day in the month of June, and oh yeah, you're playing a 4-game set in St. Pete. Okay, fine. But then, yeah, Monday night's game, yeah, you're playing a night game.
Well, they got to get
no
a
fun.
nice dinner down in St. Pete on Sunday night after the
Yeah.
game, and it's lovely and under the bridge. And yeah, but I mean, I hear you. I mean, this is what we talked
Weird.
about last week, dog days, right? And the dog days really begin now. Not now, but now, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when, my wife's like, who's in next week? While her foot's in a cast and she's sitting here watching some broadcaster we never heard of, and Brian Roberts. I mean, all these broadcasters the last week and a half have been interesting. And, I love Greg Olson, but I miss Ben McDonald, Jim Palmer to some degree. But I would say this, just the schedule itself. Days off, awful, right? I mean, that's hard enough.
Hmm.
Weather, it's going to be 90 degrees here come Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock, of course, when somebody will offer me tickets to go out to the game and sit there and sweat in my polyester. I would just say these next 2 weeks, and as I talk to you, sort of, I'm not dour about it, but I said if they have a 16 and 12 month this month or something that feels like not 700 ball, but feels more like 550 ball, this would be the time of the year where I could find that, you don't want to find yourself at 9 and 11 the next 20 games, but this is where it would happen. Pitching problems, guys going away, tough schedule, and you're playing the best teams every night, and in some cases getting their best starters too.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, when has this team played like that? I mean, going back to last year, when have they had stretches where they've struggled, even like that against good teams? I mean, it's very rare. They had that stretch right around the 4th of July last year. What was it? They lost 6 of 7 at one point.
I was
I
going to
mean,
say
that
they haven't had a whole lot of 10-10s, like
yeah, and
over
that's my
20,
point.
right?
That's
Yeah.
my point. I mean, okay, we could talk at times and say, okay, they haven't been great, that they've been pretty good, but I mean, like this weekend was a perfect example. I mean, we talked about the disappointment of how the Toronto series finished up. There was concern at the time as far as, okay, Cade Povich is coming in. What does that mean with Kyle Bradish? Is he not feeling great? Kyle Bradish looked pretty darn good on Saturday. So again, it's just another matter of, can you keep him healthy over the course of the year, because you're reminded every time he goes out about what kind of pitcher he is. But I mean, they get a good start from Cole Irvin on Friday night. Bradish does what he does on Saturday. Grayson Rodriguez, perfect through 5 innings. Disappointing for his start to finish in the 6th inning. Ran out of gas a little bit and couldn't quite finish off that inning. But they still, they won the game, and they score runs late to pull away. I mean,
And I'm
it's a
sitting at
lot.
the bar at Costas, and I said to John and Karen, "Wait," I'm like, "Has he given up a hit yet?" It's like the 4th inning.
It
I'm
was
like,
perfect.
"Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah." I
mean,
mean, and then the walk, and I'm like, "All right," but you're thinking out loud. He ain't finishing the game anyway. You know what I mean?
yeah.
None of these guys are, and that certainly speaks to Bradish a couple weeks ago. But it doesn't matter. Rodriguez, Burns does it on Monday night. It won't matter. I There's no such thing as a 92 pitch 9 inning, no hitter in the modern era. The way hitters work counts as much as anything else. Work pitches and are trained to do that. That even 112 pitch, no hitter. I don't know. You get the 98 pitches in the 8th inning. What do you? It's I don't know how there's going to be a no hitter in the way Nolan Ryan and Cy Young would want it to be.
I think you'll still see it, because I mean, you still see some complete games around baseball, but boy, the pitch count is so crucial. And that was the thing with Grayson Rodriguez. As well as he pitched, I mean, I think he was at 75 pitches through 5 innings, which isn't a bad average. I mean, 15 pitches per inning. I mean, even you'll hear Jim Palmer talking the telecast. That's kind of, that's not optimal, but that's kind of the
Where
ideal.
is the limit on? I mean, I don't even know, because I don't feel like we ever see it, because they're always gone at 70, 80, or 90. I don't know if there is 100,
Well,
200, 600. We don't see that anymore.
he threw 107 on Sunday. I
Right.
mean, he got into the 6th inning, and it was clear Brandon Hyde was trying to get him through that inning. I
By
mean,
the way, the last 15 pitches, you could have taken him at 92 if you had more bullpen
yeah,
and you weren't in a streak of 3 weeks in a row. That
right.
last inning was going to get him crushed.
Yeah, well, and I think some of that is also, I mean, I thought the last inning was also an example of his development, that you're trying to have him pitch through that, and he didn't quite do it. Now, I mean, obviously, it's not like he had a bad outing. Dylan Tate comes in. You'd like him to not give up inherited runs, but that kind of is what it is. Overall, the bullpen was great over the weekend. At least going into the Monday night series, pending outcome for that. But I think that was an example of, maybe last year Brandon Hyde just pulls the plug on Grayson Rodriguez before that final batter, just couldn't quite put him away. And I was actually wondering, you kept seeing him blow on his fingers. I was wondering if he was actually trying to fight off, working off, a potential blister starting there. I mean, we'll see. Not trying to sound the alarm, but you could see he kept blowing on his fingers the last 3, 4, or 5 batters of that outing. But he was really, really good. And I couldn't help but I had the tweet fired up, and I didn't pull the trigger on it because it felt like a little anticlimactic because he didn't get through the 6th. But I just kept thinking as I was watching him over the last couple of innings on Sunday, on the heels of Bradish pitching on Saturday, and knowing that Burns was going Monday night, just thinking Corbin Burns, Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez. If the Orioles can just find a way to get those 3 to October healthy, and you just daydream about the potential there. And look, other teams have great rotations, and I mean, look what the Yankees have done. I mean, the Phillies have an amazing starting trio atop the National League. But Burns, Bradish, Rodriguez, if they're all healthy come October, and that's a big if, especially with Bradish right now. I mean, I'll take my chances, especially with the way this team hits the ball. I mean, so it was good to see that. Again, you'd love to see Grayson get through 6 there, no doubt about it. But you're right. I mean, when you're looking at this, and you know who's hating these scenarios. I mean, he loves it because they're pitching well, but Brandon Hydes hates seeing Grayson Rodriguez perfect through 5 when he's already at 75 pitches. That he's just like, oh my gosh, there's no way this guy's going to be able to finish this. But I don't want to be the guy that pulls him out when he's has a perfect game. I mean, he will, and we saw it with Kyle Bradish a couple weeks
Well,
ago.
the
I
only
mean,
way the game stays perfect is to conserve pitches. When you have a 28 pitch inning, you're still
yeah,
probably not throwing a no hitter anymore. I
right.
mean,
Well,
that's literally part of the gig, right?
right, but even and that kind of goes to the point that you were making that I mean the stars have to I mean the stars always had to align for a perfect game or a no hitter. Let's be clear about this. But even more so in the modern day with pitch counts and the injuries just being so abundant across the
Dude,
league.
here's
I
the
mean,
problem. It's June 10th here, and we've already had 3 or 4 occurrences with this franchise and these starters putting us in a position where you might have to send out a text in the 8th inning. I don't know where, but like we've had no hitter conversations once a week here for a month and a half because guys keep doing
yeah,
it. So I don't know. You say, do you have no hit stuff? Well, we can't go a week without talking about would Brandon Hyde this and how many pitches is that and whatever. Man, our conversations have come a long way, bro.
I was just going to say these are good problems to have when you're talking about your pitch count because your guy's
Yeah,
been
they
so
had a
good.
weekend sweep that wasn't a sweep because they're playing a Monday night. We can't call it that, but they haven't lost since last week. And we're nitpicking on whether Rodriguez should be throwing the 105th pitch. Probably not, by the way, all things being
Yeah.
equal at this point, based on what we saw. So I think we do learn a little bit more about it. And, dude, that kid's going to have 5 other occasions in his career where he's going to take a no hitter into the 5th or 6th or 7th. To your point, getting to the 9th, that's the magic trick that Nolan
Yeah.
Ryan, that real war horses, guys that could get 140 pitches out of their arms, because none of those guys did it with 92 pitches either.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Unless you were Greg Maddux, which famously, I mean they nicknamed a complete game of under 100 pitches a Maddux. Unless you're in more of that scenario where you can have 1 or 2 innings where the pitches are up there, but you better have a 7 pitch inning
Yes,
in
because
you at
Maddox
some
was throwing
point.
the ball 82 miles an hour and it looked like a beach ball and you couldn't hit it.
Yeah, although he still struck out his fair share of guys, but yeah, I mean it's your point.
Well, when they swing and miss, they don't make contact. And they have to do that 3 times to strike out. So when they can't hit it.
Sure, sure,
So
but
they
you need
keep
to be
swinging and missing, and he has to throw more pitches, which is how pitch counts happen, right? Nolan
yeah.
Ryan struck out 12 in a no hitter. Well, dude, right off the bat, I know he threw some balls because he was gamely wild, and maybe not at the end of his career, but in the middle he was for sure. Like Randy Johnson, the one works against the other. I don't know what the side, you
Yeah.
sat with George Schulin, you were the school teacher. Tell me what that scientific property is. But whatever that is, if you're a strikeout pitcher, you throw a lot of pitches. If you're a strikeout pitcher, guys can't touch the ball, which is part of the gig, and you wind up with a lot of pitches. So that it really does. It's counterproductive to thinking you can throwing a no hitter in any era, let alone in this era, with the mindset. I mean, the first thing we're saying at the bar of Costas is this organization's not going to let him finish a game. Like,
No, nor should they. And again, where he was now, there are layers to this. I mean, if the stars align and the pitch count is, I mean, we saw. Remember the game he had against Tampa last September. I mean, he went 8 innings in that game. Yeah, if he had a no hitter through 8 innings at that point, I can't remember what the pitch count was off the top of my head. That might have been a scenario where you might have sent him out there, and you go hitter by hitter, and
it's also,
win
is the
away.
game 1-0, 2-0, or 7-0?
Exactly. And that's the thing. And I was texting with my cousin who, was a longtime Orioles fan. And we were just, we tend to text during games, especially when he knows I'm not at the game, when they're on the road and I'm just watching at home. And I said, I mean, look, no hitters and shutouts and perfect games and all that stuff is great. And that stuff is becoming more and more of a rarity. I mean, we all know that. But at the same time, and he wholeheartedly agreed, just speaking strictly as a fan, you're thinking about October. I mean, you're thinking about that. My
Don't get Kyle Bradish hurt, whatever we do.
Exactly. Look, you can take all the precautions and you still have no guarantee that you're going. I mean, look look at John Means. I mean, he just got second Tommy John surgery in 25 months. I mean, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal for him. And it's not as though the Orioles did anything reckless with him. He rehabbed and he threw 4 starts last September and he didn't feel great and threw 4 starts in May and didn't feel great. I mean, it's so you always have to think about the end game, what's best for your team, and also, yes, what's best for the pitcher. And so many of these guys, I mean, Grayson Rodriguez, you could see, I mean, he was fuming in that 6th inning. I mean, you see why the Orioles love him so much, why his teammates love him. I mean, he really does have that old school competitor mindset to him. I mean, you mentioned Nolan Ryan. I mean, he's the kind of guy that if he, if he pitched 40 years ago, he would have had that bulldog mentality that I'll throw 140 pitches tonight. That's fine.
Clemens was that way too.
Yeah, I mean there are plenty of
Schilling
guys
was
like
that way.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
in
in
the
this,
modern era, there were definitely some guys that had that Bob Gibson, Drysdale, like
yeah,
whatever that extra kick, Jack Morris. I mean, go through the names of, and it is an attitude. It really
Yeah.
is. It's what you bring to the mound.
I mean you're ticked off for greatness, right? I mean, for to use the Ray Lewis description, clean it up a little bit. But I mean, it's just, I mean, Grayson Rodriguez wants to be great. He's not a finished product yet by any means. I think we see that. And that's why I said I thought Brandon Hyde leaving him in to try to finish the 6th inning there, that felt a little, one, he was pitching so well. And two, I think it was one of those spots where that was kind of a teachable moment or a moment where he could learn something. Hyde could learn something about his pitcher.
Also showing confidence in him too.
Yeah, right. That's my point. So, and look, you have to pick your spots there. And he threw 107 pitches. I'm guessing that they're probably going to try to slot Cade Povich in to try to give Grayson Rodriguez an extra day between, this start and his next start for that reason, because 107, I believe, was his career high. I think they said that on the telecast, and I'd believe it, knowing how he's been handled mostly. So, you're not sounding the alarm because he threw 107 pitches, but if you can give him an extra day here.
I wonder if you talked to him the day after, 2 days after, and he were being honest. And like back in my era, they were always honest, right? When I would talk to Messina or talk to Mark, whoever it was that was pitch Ben, any of those guys, how'd you do? They would sit at their locker and say, yeah, like 108 feels different than 90 the day after. Like, and I don't know that, but I do know, and it's been a while because I've been thrown out by Greg Bader and these folks that it's been a while since I've been in a locker room after a game where the guy had the bag of ice on his shoulder. I don't know if they still do it that way or they stim out or whether sometimes they're at their locker literally iced up, but the icing process and all of that from a journalist standpoint was something I didn't know about until I had a press pass. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, or talking to so many of them about their arms on a daily basis. I really do wonder for a young guy like that when it's been taxed more than ever in his modern career. Maybe at some point when he was younger, somebody threw him out there in Little League and let him throw the ball all night. I don't know. But that is pretty much where the limit. I mean, $1.7, $1.8, is he ever going to throw $1.12, $1.15? And part of it really is, how do you feel? How not what he's going to tell us, how he really feels. And that 6th day would speak a lot to that, to say that he feels like he needs it. But to your point, precautionary, once the doctors come down and say you're going to give it to him because the chart says we're going to do that, to your point, they're all managing that at this point. He is their real ticket.
Right, they are. But as Mike Elias said when he announced the John Means surgery news, there's still a lot more art than science to it. I mean, and it's not just how they feel. I mean, you have, with all the tracking data, the StatCast data, all that. I mean, you can really see, you can see when
how they perform. Yeah.
Velo dips, how the movement on their pitches looks different. I mean, the release point changes a little bit. I mean, there's lots of data there, but at the same time, there's a feeling out process to it. I mean, to your point, not all 6-inning or 8-inning or 9-inning outings are created equally. If Grayson Rodriguez had a 9-0 lead there rather than what it was 2-0 at the time or 3-0 at the time, that might have been a little bit different there. He might have pitched a little bit differently there, but it was a close game at that point in time. So, it's just, we remember what was it, 3 weeks ago, I guess it was, Corbin Burns was done at was it 85 pitches? And fans on social media were kind of like, hey, what's going on? Why did Hyde pull him after 85 pitches? Come to speak to Corbin Burns in the clubhouse after the game. He flat out said, look, I was gassed. It was one of those outings where you have some of those long at bats and guys foul off pitches, and you have some 8, 9, 10 pitch at bats, and sometimes you're fried after
Dude, the
85.
manager appreciates that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, I mean, just as a human, I appreciate candor and
Sure.
honesty, across all of that. And this does speak to how much you and I have been talking about Tommy John surgery and my era of being what a journalist used to be and your era of what a journalist is and what they're going to say and what they're not going to say. And in the old days, it was very much if you came in with a sore arm, you're letting everybody down. You don't want to tell anybody. You
Right.
want to work through it. If you're one pitch away from Norfolk and you're on that boat to begin with, you don't want to tell anybody
Sure.
that there's something wrong. And to your point, the minute they show the video, you can see they're favoring something. They're like, whoa, 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 what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Arms dropping a quarter of an inch, something's wrong. So, and the science part of that would rat a lot of that out, I think, at this point, right? Like, and also the macho manliness, fighting for my job. Everybody's getting this freaking surgery. Everybody's afraid of it. It's the boogeyman. And in some cases, I guess if you're a parent, 17-year-old, you think, oh, we'll fix little Johnny and he'll pitch 12 years in the majors, because there's a lot of that that's going on too.
Yeah.
And I like $6 million man surgery, right? Or something like that. I just look at it as managing assets and the old way of doing it, and the new way of doing it, of what a sore arm or dead arm period or whatever those things you would old days you would say it's something's tender, something's wrong. And I know as a 55-year-old guy, when I walk too much on my knee, it's a little tender, it's a little wrong. And I
Yeah.
should, it tells me to get off it, not to stay on it, but I'm not doing that to make a living. And if I was delivering milk crates, I'd have to get on it. And that's part of injured workman's comp, all the things that happen of when you try to stay on your job and you're a little messed up. I don't think they'll allow pitchers to do that anymore, to your point, because the science would shut that down quicker than their macho would allow them to come in and say, Coach, something's wrong today.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'll still find some of that, but I'm guessing that those periods of time where someone's pitching with some discomfort or whatever it is, far more fleeting than it might have been years ago, where someone might pitch with a bad elbow for 2 months. Now it might be, oh, maybe you'll get a start or two, but it'll start to show up. It'll start to show up in the velo, release point, whatever you're
Performance
trying.
just starting to get
Yeah,
hit hard too.
sure,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
to go back to something you said, because I wanted to make this point as well, because you mentioned as far as seeing guys with their, ice bag, all that, you have to remember pitchers don't go as deep into games on the regular anymore. So for the
They're
most
done
part,
icing,
they're
right?
usually done most of that. I mean, they're kind of showering up, and that's not to say they won't get any more treatment or anything like that. But yeah, the last point on that, because I don't want to dwell too much on the health here, because I mean they also just performed really well over the weekend. But I think with pitchers, they know their bodies, and look, there is general soreness that they all experience after every outing. I mean, how could you not? In the same way that you go to the gym, it's leg day, your legs are sore the next day, just for, the common man who's working out. But these guys also know when something feels off. And again, that goes to the point that we were just talking about. So, again, with Grayson Rodriguez, remember he had the shoulder inflammation earlier in the year. You're obviously being mindful of not having anything like that, but he pitched really, really well on Sunday. That was great to see. It was even, I mean, great to see Kyle Bradish do what he did Saturday on the heels of him getting a couple extra days. And there was some speculation like, what's going on here? And I think a lot of that was, I don't want to say gamesmanship. They wanted to give him a couple extra days, but I think the Orioles being as tight-lipped as they were for a couple days just led naturally to some speculation. But I think a lot of it is just, they're just trying to be mindful here. They know that, and this is why I talked about this down the stretch last year. We talked about it a lot as far as the Orioles. Yeah, they wanted to keep the Rays in second place, and they wanted to win the division. But we kept reminding that Kyle Bradish, career high in innings. Grayson Rodriguez, career high in innings. Dean Kramer, career high in innings. Tyler Wells started having issues at the right around the All-Star break. So, I mean, you're
Well, you
trying to.
talked about this a lot last spring. A year and a half ago, you started talking about it more than I,
Yeah,
because clearly it's a buzz around all organizations and around the sport. And now we're seeing the backside of it a year and a half
yeah,
later with
and
three key cog guys that they want to give the ball to in whatever way. Closer, starter who threw a no-hitter, left-hander, key part of your rotation, part of the plan, in the return, and Wells, whatever he was going to be. He was a very effective guy beginning of last year, and would have been a nice arm to have, a nice piece to have in October. Gone. And,
yeah,
and this is a good organization. This is an organization that thinks it's going to win the World Series still, has all these bats. But this is devastating when you put it that way. When you start talking about two starters and your closer going on the shelf within 8 months of each other while you're trying to win a World Series. This is the Ravens losing. Pick your guy, pick your offensive lineman, your linebacker, and your secondary guy, right?
yeah. I mean, the one thing I'll push back on a little bit is at full strength, Tyler Wells is going to be in the bullpen. But still holds true, especially with no Batista. Was Tyler Wells? I wasn't projecting him to overtake Craig Kimbrell. Let's be clear about that. But I thought Tyler Wells had the chance to be a really nice seventh and eighth inning option
You
for
thought he
them.
was going to be an 80, 90 inning, 6, 7 inning guy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he was in the bullpen because or he was in the rotation because they had a need early on with Means and Bradish sideline. But I think if you're talking about everyone being at full strength, to me, Wells was a bullpen arm. But that's still, hey, we've been talking about the bullpen all year. We're going to
He
continue
would
to
have been a
talk about
guy
the.
that pitched 3 times a week in some capacity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe some high leverage situations as well. So other than that, though, I mean, yeah, I mean this, and look, when we talk about innings limits and pitch counts and all that, I don't because I know a lot of old school fans get frustrated with that. And look, from an aesthetic standpoint, yeah, I miss starters not going 7 innings on the regular and pitching complete games more consistently and all of that. But we've talked about the mentality, the mindset of how these guys pitch is just different than it was in decades past. I'm not saying it's better. I'll continue to say that. I question quite a bit uh, the long-term viability of what we're seeing across baseball, not the Orioles specifically, but just the max effort mindset. Because
Which is different than the way Boddicker, Flanagan, and
exactly,
McGregor
I mean,
threw
so
the
much different.
baseball. And Steve Stone, all those guys threw the baseball differently. In first inning, you go out, you get
Yeah,
into the groove, you're pitching, but you're not out there 3-2, bases loaded. I've got to blow it by him kind of thing. Like that was, you threw 12 of those a game,
yeah.
not
Now it,
not 58 of them.
yeah, exactly. And to be clear, I mean, some of this is just the natural evolution of baseball. Those guys that you just mentioned that pitched 40 or 50 or 60 years ago pitched way differently than Cy Young did at the end of the 19th century into early 20th century baseball. I mean, those days guys pitched every other day, but they were not putting much on their arms anyway. And part of it was a dead ball era and no one was going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. So you have that over the course of the history of baseball. But I saw a stat the other day. I saw it on Twitter. It just had a list of the number of pitchers used across baseball for in a season, and it started in '98, which last time we saw expansion in Major League Baseball with the Rays and the Diamondbacks in '98. And to see the numbers from '98, the total number of pitchers used in 1998 across the major leagues compared to what it is now, and to really see how dramatic the shift has been over the last 12 years or so. I mean, it just speaks to the difference in the strategy and the mindset and the approach of how guys are pitching, and also the injury factor. So
And the way organizations have to play it with
yeah. I mean,
having
it's
22 pitchers, they know even if you're a good team, you're going to go through 22 pitchers in a year that are going to
minimum,
pitch innings, right? In your
minimum.
organization, even though we go down to Sarasota and we hem and haw about who the 12th or 13th guy
Yeah,
is going to be and what they're going to do when they come up on April 1st, we sit here on June 10th and we're in a different world, dude.
no doubt about it. And that's why I kept saying, as I revealed my little daydream as I was saying about Burns, Grayson Rodriguez, and Kyle Bradish, in whatever order you want to put them. Burns, of course, being the number one. But if you can just navigate this these next 3.5 months and have those guys all healthy for October, I mean, man, I mean, that's just, we were talking about that. What was it? February 1st when the Orioles acquired Burns, a couple days after the ownership news. But I mean, it's a long season, and every team is talking about what you and I are talking about right now. I mean, the Yankees, they're getting ready to get Garrett Cole
Who's going to
back,
pitch?
but Garrett Cole comes back. Who else is going to stay healthy? I mean, you love the guys that you're pitching right now. I mean, the Orioles are going through a stretch here where even with some of the concerns about the health that we've talked about, and on the heels of losing Means and Wells for the season, they've pitched really well. I mean, look at the aggregate results. They've pitched really well here over for weeks now. But there's still that angst as far as who's staying healthy. How are you getting through this stretch without any off days? 6-man rotation, 7-man bullpen. I mean, all these different questions. I mean, that's why, Mike Elias and the coaching staff and Brandon Hyde, I mean, they're in constant dialogue in terms of trying to manage this. And that's why they're scouring the waiver wire. And we've seen, like the Vieira, the guy they brought in who didn't last long, obviously, but those are the kind of arms.
Well, they went with Fuji until, whoever they bring in, you got to give them an opportunity until you can win on them, right?
Especially if they have a live arm, right? I mean, that was the thing. I mean, you saw Vieira threw 98, his one outing with the Orioles.
Send it down to Norfolk till he figures it out.
Well, I mean, the guys that you can try to do that with, you do it. But I mean, a lot of these guys, the problem is all 30 teams are looking for arms like that. So when someone shakes loose, you say, that's an interesting arm.
Give him a chance.
But then you see him and say, I can see now why the last guy gave up on him. So, I mean, we're going to talk about this. The trade deadline is still what, 6 weeks out, something like that.
And they play every day this month. So pitching is going to be what we're talking about.
Exactly. And that's why, on days where Grayson Rodriguez throws 107, hey, I'm not saying that that's wrong or that Brandon Hyde was foolish there or anything like that. But that's why don't be surprised if they bump Grayson Rodriguez back a day, or, and most likely Kate Povich is still in the majors, so barring a starter getting knocked out between now and whenever his turn would come up, he's probably going to start, and that'll bump everyone else back a day. And by the way, even Corbin Burns, as great as he is, could still benefit from an extra day now and then. I'm not saying you do that with him all the time, obviously, but you want to keep him healthy because he's your ace. So there's a lot of that going on, but in the meantime, good pitching over the weekend. And, this, to your point, we can't call it a sweep because of this weird Monday night finale, but good to see the Orioles regroup the way they did. And let's also point something out here, just in a big 30,000 feet kind of look and perspective, as the Orioles just moved over 20 games over 500. They moved to 20 over on Sunday. And meanwhile, the Tampa Bay Rays are under 500. We know how these teams fought all summer and fall, or, September last year for the division. Yeah, I get it. The Rays traded Glass now. They traded Margot. So it's not like they were the same exact team, but they were great last year. I mean, give them credit for all the rotation attrition that they endured and they experienced, losing McClanahan and some of those other guys that they lost as far as bullpen, starters and relief options. They were great, but you see how it's gone for them this year. And that's where I look at this and say, with the Orioles, especially with how the Yankees have just been so great. I mean, the Orioles are hanging right there. I mean, they're right there. And, they were able to trim a couple games over the weekend, and that was great to see. They're getting ready to play the Yankees here after this upcoming homestand. They'll be going to the Bronx after that. I mean, buckle up. It's going to be a really interesting, exciting, nerve-wracking, angst-filled summer. And I'm all for it. I mean, that's what you and I and so many fans were longing for such a long time, and save for a few years here and there over the last 25, it's been very fleeting. So for them to follow up a 101 win season with what they've done to this point, just look at the Rays and let's not take this for granted, regardless of what happens with the AL East race specifically, that the Orioles are doing this 2 years in a row. Very rare, not just in the Camden Yards era of Orioles baseball, but in the history of the franchise. Again, go back and look. 69-70 is the one example of anything, a little bit better than what we're seeing, because they won 109 and 69, and I think it was 108 and 70. But back-to-back 100-plus win seasons, I mean, that's rare. That's very rare. So for the Orioles to be doing this and fully acknowledging not everything's gone perfectly for them to this point, it really does speak to the overall state of this organization and how exciting it truly is.
We're going to talk about how they catch the ball and hit the ball as well as throw the ball. This is a lot of pitching in here. Luke and I get after it almost every day in talking Oriole baseball. You can find it all out at Baltimore Positive, of course, WNST AM 1570. All of it made possible by our friends and many sponsors, including our friends at Royal Farms, who put the coffee in the Cole Roofing mug. Big appreciation to them, as well as Wise Markets for their annual sponsorship. We do the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, keeping our water clean, and Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. We're going to be at Coco's on Wednesday afternoon. Friday, we are at Cooper's downtown, the one at Fells Point. We were up at Cooper's North last week talking about Fleet Week this week. So we are not at Fadley's on Friday. We are at Cooper's down on the square in beautiful Fells Point as the planes fly over, the Phillies fly in, the ballpark sold out. Hey, Phillies, hey! That'll be this weekend. Luke's going to be out at training camps. We got football, baseball. The Braves are in. Pictures of Bob Horner and Dale Murphy are showing up on my timeline, as well as Henry Aaron. I don't wear a lot of throwbacks, but I would wear that white and blue, Braves Atlanta Hank Aaron 44. I'd like to get me one of those. It would have to breathe a little better than my polyester wool in the sun on Thursday. I am Nestor. He is Luke. It's football, baseball, and more. We're Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.